Right now in South Korea, there is a very strange kind of time travel happening in everyone's head. Imagine a person who spends their entire morning crying over a movie about independence fighters who died 80 years ago, calling them the ultimate symbols of courage and sacrifice. They post on social media that they would have gladly given their lives for the country back then. They swear they will never buy a single Japanese pen or eat a single piece of sushi to honor those fallen heroes. But then, as soon as they step outside and see a real living soldier waiting for a bus in his uniform, they roll their eyes and call him a loser. They mock him for being a whiner and act like his 2 years of mandatory military service are just a free taxpayer-funded vacation. It is like weeping over a historical documentary about firefighters while actively trying to trip a guy who is currently running into a burning building to save your own house. This is a level of hypocrisy that is almost impressive if it wasn't so incredibly damaging to the actual soul of the country. Why is this happening? Why would a society demand this kind of bizarre selective morality where they worship the dead but despise the living? When you peel back the layers of this digital masquerade, you find a very aggressive, very modern struggle for social and financial dominance. In a society where everything is a high-stakes competition, virtue has become just another product you can buy for $0. For a specific segment of the population, especially within the current wave of local digital culture, patriotism is a fashion statement. By identifying with dead martyrs from the colonial era, people get to claim all the moral high ground, without ever having to step foot in a muddy trench or lose a single day of their careers. They are fighting for their share of the social pie, and the easiest way to get a bigger slice is to make sure the guy standing next to them, the one actually doing the physical work of national defense, stays at the very bottom of the social ladder. But why would they actually demand this? Why is the mockery so targeted? It comes down to a ruthless capitalist calculation of victimhood. In this environment, being seen as the biggest victim is the only currency that still buys you special treatment, social immunity, and political power. If a soldier is recognized as someone making a genuine sacrifice, then the narrative shifts. If he is a hero, then he might deserve respect or even compensation. And for those competing for the title of the most oppressed, that is a threat. So, they have to turn the soldier into a villain or a joke. They label his hardship as toxic masculinity or just unnecessary complaining so they don't have to feel any moral debt toward him. They want to keep the monopoly on empathy. It is much easier to maintain your status as a progressive, patriotic citizen if you can convince everyone that the man guarding the border is just a guy playing soldier, while you are the one doing the real emotional labor of boycotting Japanese stationery. So how did the culture get this way? How does a country that is technically still at war with its neighbor forget that its own survival depends on the people it is currently humiliating? This is where the cultural context of the frozen war comes in. Because the country has been in a state of suspended conflict for so long, the peace feels like a natural law of the universe. It doesn't feel like something that has to be manually maintained every single day by thousands of young men sleeping in barracks. People have started to view the military not as a shield, but as a low-status labor camp for people who weren't clever enough or rich enough to find a way out of it. And since everyone is obsessed with their social image, participating in a movement like the No Japan boycott of 2019 was the ultimate way to look conscious. It was an easy way to feel important without doing anything. They would scream at a stranger for buying a Japanese notebook in a store, while they went home and secretly spent hundreds of hours playing Japanese video games because they told themselves their own entertainment was different. What happens when you follow this chain of logic to its end? What does it say about a society that creates this specific context? It creates a world of zero-cost virtue. You get to feel like a revolutionary independence fighter by just not buying a specific brand of beer. It is a hobby for the protected, and this is where the young 40 demographic comes in. Older men who desperately want to stay relevant or gain favor with younger women. They act as the enablers, providing a shield for this toxic behavior. They join in on the mockery of the younger soldiers to prove how woke or supportive they are, effectively sabotaging the next generation to maintain their own shaky social standing. It creates a feedback loop where the more you hate on the actual protectors of the state, the more you are rewarded with likes and upvotes in your digital echo chamber. So what happened when they got exactly what they asked for? What happens when you successfully turn your own military into a national joke? You get the most ridiculous, most predictable backfire in history. The very same communities that led the charge to socially destroy anyone seen with a Japanese product are now the ones leading the charge to book every single flight to Tokyo and Osaka. The moment the trend shifted and it became cool to visit Japan again, the historical grievances and the No Japan stickers vanished into thin air. The boycott didn't end because the history was resolved. It ended because it got boring and people wanted their shopping trips back. The hypocrisy is so thick you could carve it with a knife. A went from calling people pro-Japanese traitors for buying a pen to posting aesthetic photos of their sushi dinners in Kyoto without missing a single beat. And what about the men? What about the soldiers who were the targets of all that mockery? They are watching. They are looking at this social contract, the deal where they sacrifice 2 years of their youth and their mental health to protect a society that openly loathes them, and they are simply walking away. They are opting out of the whole system. They are opting out of dating, they are opting out of marriage, and they are opting out of the idea of ever having children. Why would anyone bring a child into a world where their service will be treated as a punchline? The cold logic of the market is finally catching up with the performative nonsense. If you treat your protectors like trash, you eventually run out of people willing to protect you. The lowest birth rate in human history isn't some mysterious accident. It is a direct result of a society where the protected have spent years actively attacking the protectors. Is the system even working at this point? Not even close. The social contract hasn't just been broken, it has been shredded and set on fire. Laws in the country mandate service for only one gender while offering absolutely no equivalent obligation for the other. And any attempt to point out this unfairness is met with a wall of digital gaslighting. When a soldier dies in a tragic training accident, you can find entire online communities celebrating that death, laughing at the loss of a life as if it were a victory for their side of the gender war. The state doesn't step in to protect the dignity of its defenders because the political class is too afraid of losing the female vote. They prefer a policy of appeasement, even if it means watching the foundations of national security crumble from the inside out. Where does this go next? If we look into the future of this farce, it is a scene of total isolation. As this trend continues, the gap between the genders will become a canyon that no one can cross. Men will increasingly adopt a philosophy of total withdrawal, moving into their own spaces, and leaving the rest of society to figure out how to defend itself. We are looking at a future defense crisis where the state might finally have to consider drafting the very people who spent years mocking the military. And you can bet that the moment that happens, all the independence fighter rhetoric will vanish instantly, replaced by a million new excuses for why they are too fragile to serve. No society can survive when its survival mechanism is treated as a pariah. It is like a person standing under a massive, sturdy stone bridge during a hurricane. They look up at the bridge and complain that it is ugly and too loud and that it gets in the way of their view. They claim they could have survived the storm just as well with a paper umbrella of virtue. The bridge is the military. The stone it is made of is the actual sacrifice of young men. The paper umbrella is the performative, trendy patriotism that looks pretty on Instagram, but provides zero protection against the wind and the rain. This person is busy picking at the stones of the bridge, trying to loosen them, all while the storm gets worse. What happens when the bridge finally falls? What happens when the neglect and the sabotage finally work? The person with the paper umbrella will be the very first one swept away by the flood. And even as they are being carried off by the water, they will probably still be arguing that they are the true victim of the weather. They will never realize that their own survival depended entirely on the thing they were trying so hard to destroy. They wanted the benefits of a civilization without any of the responsibilities. And they are about to find out that a paper umbrella doesn't stop a hurricane. Why does this metaphor fit so perfectly? Because it highlights the total delusion of entitlement. It exposes the idea that feelings and trends are as strong as physical sacrifice and national defense. It captures the irony of a demographic that enjoys the maximum safety of a modern state while actively dismantling the pillars that support it. They are standing on the shoulders of giants and complaining that the giants are too tall and taking up too much space. It is a tragic, hilarious, and ultimately self-destructive cycle that shows no signs of stopping. So, the next time you see a viral post about a brave person boycotting a Japanese snack or crying over a war movie from the 1930s, take a look at how they treat the person in uniform standing right next to them. If they love the dead but hate the living, you aren't looking at a patriot. You are looking at a consumer of outrage. You are looking at someone who wants the glory of the past with none of the duty of the present. They are holding their paper umbrella tight, even as the sky turns black and the bridge starts to shake. Fuel the truth at Dating in Korea. Support the structure. Stay safe in the lounge.